Good afternoon, everyone. We're so glad to have you with us today. This is our last webinar for this school year. And of course, what are we doing? We're following up on that algebraic reasoning session that we had in April. So we're really looking forward to having you with us today and to you talking with us today as we go through and discuss some of the different things that occurred in your classrooms as a result of the algebra tiles and using those. So just a few housekeeping rules as we go through. If you take a look at what you're seeing now, you actually should be seeing the webinar itself, the PowerPoint, and you have a screen over to your right that includes information, everything from testing. You can do a sound check on your mic and speakers and telephone, but also you should see a little part that says handouts, 2 of 5. And so there are today 2 handouts that go along with this particular session, and you can download those. Now, the other thing that as we go through, please feel free to ask questions. If there's a comment that you want to make and you don't have a microphone so that you can ask it out loud, then you can always go to the question box. And the question box, again, is located on that right-hand panel, and you can enter a question, and Bonnie and I will be monitoring that throughout the workshop itself. The other thing that you can do is you can also raise your hand during that question and answer period. Just another couple things to keep in mind. Right now, all of you are muted, and we do that not because we don't want to hear you talk, but because we want to make sure we limit that outside noise that may be here as we're going through, and because we always have those things kind of going in the background. However, as we get into the webinar itself, we will unmute you when we have different people who are going to be talking about what they've been doing since we last saw you back in April. So, Bonnie, how about just taking us through a little bit about our objectives today?
Okay, Susan, today we're going to discuss the results of your interim activities. We want you to be able to share the activity that you selected and why, as well as the response of your students and what those outcomes were. And as Susan said before, as we have you share, we'll unmute you so that you have that opportunity to talk. We're also going to talk a little bit further about some of the research results from the GED testing service that recently came down, and we hope you're as excited about some of those results as Susan and I are. And then, last but not least, we're going to answer any questions that you have and address any concerns and take a little bit of a look towards the future. But before we get started, we want to hear from you. So Susan, how about if we get started by having our participants take a quick poll?
Well, that sounds good. Okay, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop a question up here for you, and it has, of course, multiple choice. And what you're going to be able to do is then make a decision based on that. So, Bonnie, this first question really deals with what type of activity they actually used in the classroom. And so what we want people to do is to let us know what you did. Did you add and subtract integers? Maybe even go to polynomials? Were you simplifying expressions? Or maybe you had your students doing those rectangular arrays where they collected those tiles. Or maybe multiplying and dividing. So we only have about 48% of you who voted so far. So, Bonnie, we want to push that number, don't we, just a little bit?
Oh, we definitely do. We'd like to see 100%, but statistically speaking, maybe we will just go with 90 to be safe.
So we're at the 70. Oh, we just jumped to 84%. And we're getting...
That means we only need one or two
we got to
people.
the 90% so far. That's fantastic. Oh, this must be the greatest response we've had so far. So we're going to give 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We had 94%, and so we're going to close that poll and we'll share the results. And so as we're sharing the results, oh, Bonnie, I think a lot of people went after that adding and subtracting of integers.
It definitely looks that way. Positives and negatives must have been a real selling point. But then I also see simplifying expressions and kind of an even thing between adding, subtracting polynomials and collecting tiles. But, you know, it's more than just content, Susan. I'd like to know why our participants chose that particular activity. So I think you've got a polling question for that, don't you?
Well, let's see. Let's do this one then. And so this one comes to, which of the following best describes why you chose that activity? So let's see how people do. Oh, we've got those first two that are running really close there.
But how are we doing percentage, Susan? Do we have 94% again?
Not yet. We're at 91. We just hit 94%. Fantastic. Oh, we even went 97% this time.
That says to me there's only one person out there.
I think so. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This poll is closed, and we'll share those results. And you can see, hey, we got two areas there, Bonnie. One, they really got lucky because that was, you know, where they happened to be at the time, which is great. And two, it's an area that everybody felt was going to be beneficial. So fantastic. You know, sometimes when we're doing activities like this, and it's hard to kind of manage all of those different things when you got so much going into the classroom. So I'm glad to see that the timing worked out right for some of the people who were there.
Very definitely. But you know, Susan, it's more than just teachers. We'd also like to know about your students. So the next polling question is going to ask you which of the following best describes your students' reaction to using algebra tiles. Because you know, sometimes students don't quite think the way we do. So go ahead and select which one does best describe your students' reaction. Were they reluctant to try it but caught on pretty fast? Did they think it was playing? You know, they really didn't feel like they were doing math. Or, like many of our students, did they just say, you know, I'd just rather do algebra the real way, the rules on paper. So which of them best describes your students? Go ahead and vote for us.
Well, we're at 75%, so we have a little ways to go yet. But it does look like, Bonnie, that first one is going to win out here, and substantially. That they were reluctant to try it, but seemed to catch on pretty fast. And
you know, Susan, that says so. I was going to say that says so much to me about how our instructors are teaching, because students do seem to be much more willing to try something when we set it up in a positive manner. So that says a lot about that positive manner, but also says a lot about the types of students, that they really are willing to try new things, even though, as I look at the poll, they thought maybe it was playing a little bit. And you know, there's no problem as far as I'm concerned with us thinking that sometimes we play at math because math should be fun.
Well, I think if students realize that math can be fun, maybe it would be a little bit of a motivating factor for them. But we don't want to stop there, because we know that as you were going through and you were trying to decide, okay, I'm going to be doing algebra tiles, how am I going to get my hands on those tiles? We want to know how you did this.
We'll see if they had someone sitting on their living room floor cutting out all those templates, or if they decided it was just much easier to get a set from someone else, or just go ahead and order a quick set. So what does it look like, Susan?
Well, we're up to 84% now, so we have just a little bit more to go. And we're at 88.
Oh, come on. We have to get over 90 on this one, too.
I know. We've been running over 90 on each one of them, so someone's sitting out there and hasn't responded yet. But we're going to close out in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And we did make the 91%, Bonnie. So,
fantastic.
Let's share those results.
We really had a mixture here of cutting to ordering to borrowing a set, and we actually had, I think this is the first time we had someone who used the virtual tiles. But I am excited to see that you now have different tiles, whether they were a template tile or whether you actually had the hands-on one that was purchased or from someone. And hopefully as you use them, you'll become comfortable enough and try that next step. We don't want to see our manipulatives end up in our closets. So I think we've got one last question.
Yeah, we do. We have one more, and we really do want to know if you think that students actually were able to take something away from this. Was it positive for your students? Did they learn some of those basic concepts?
This is a forced selection question. There's no maybe about it. It's either a yes or a no.
That's it exactly. And we are over the 90% mark once again. Oh, back up to 94%. So we're going to close this poll and we will share those results with you.
Wow.
Looks pretty good.
I was going to say, that's a wonderful thing to see. As Susan and I had talked during the training, when students have a strong understanding of algebra and that abstractness of algebra, algebra tiles aren't necessary, but as we begin the teaching of it, this concreteness is a wonderful way to get them to understand the concept so that as the problems become more complex, they can think about how it should look. So thank you for sharing in the poll, but we really want to know a little bit more. So we'd like to next just talk a little bit, and we'd like you to be able to share with the group things like an anecdote regarding a student who was motivated by this activity or found some success where that student had often struggled, or maybe an anecdote about a student who was able to solve a word problem because that student now had learned the new strategies. Also, as you share, if you would please, was there anything you needed to modify to make that activity work for your students? And definitely, what was your biggest takeaway from the experience? But Susan, I know that sometimes we have folks who may not have the technology to go ahead and speak to us either through their microphone or their phone. So to make sure that we call on folks who do have the verbal capabilities, at least technology-wise, let's have them hold up their hand by their name so that we know who is able to share with us.
So if you have a microphone or if you have you're on a phone itself, if you could just raise your hand, then we'd like to see, and I only see one hand up. Don't tell me that Catherine is going to have to carry it for all of us. Yes, now I see some other names that are popping in here as we're going through. But we really do want to know some of the outcomes. And we're not asking that, you give a 15-minute talk by any means. This is a short webinar. But we do want you to share with us. And so, Catherine.
But Susan?
Uh-huh.
I was going to say, if they can't talk to us, let's go ahead and have them put a few comments to us in writing.
Oh,
They
that
can
sounds
just go
good.
ahead and keyboard in a few ideas.
Sounds fantastic, but I think we're going to start with Catherine. Catherine Beachy, I'm going to unmute your microphone so that you can go ahead and talk. So Catherine?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Hi, ladies.
Hello. How did everything go?
Things have been going great since we last saw you. We're using algebra tiles in all of our math classes now.
Fantastic. So how did students respond? Can you kind of give us a little story or how things were really going?
Yeah, so I only had the one student I was working with, and he was really struggling to understand how to simplify expressions, how to solve equations, and even having trouble with combining integers, right? Adding and subtracting negative and positive values. And it was really starting to concern me. And so the first day I met with him, coming back from our session on that Friday, I decided to go ahead, and even though I wasn't feeling completely comfortable about working with the tiles, or at least showing someone else how to work with them, I decided to go ahead and just jump in feet first. And by the end of that session, and we met for about 3 hours, he was solving the problems even before I asked him to finish solving the problems. Yeah, it was pretty awesome. The funny thing with him, though, was that, so he's got a mechanics background, automotive background, and I didn't know this, but apparently on the car batteries, the red value means positive and the green means negative. And so he was having a lot of trouble at first getting those two switched around. And I was like, well, you know, you can go ahead and make your green negative if you like, and the red can be positive. Like, I'm not going to hold you to, you know, keeping the red negative. But he was so adamant that, no, I'm going to do it the way it should properly be done in the math world. So.
You know, and you made a good comment. He could have changed out as long as it continued to work that way in his brain. So that was a good comment that you gave to him. But was he surprised how much algebra he uses in work? Because in automotive, you use algebraic reasoning all the time.
He was, actually. He said that there are things that he does for his job that he now finds himself understanding more quickly, or grasping more quickly mathematically, and that he's actually started using some of the basic concepts that he's been learning in class to help him solve certain problems at work. So I thought that was pretty exciting, because I don't really know anything about automotive work, so the fact that he could take what he was learning in class and then apply it was exciting for me. I'm sure it was exciting for him.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's fantastic. So did you already have a set of algebra tiles there, or did you have to order them, or what did you do?
We had 2 small little pouches. I think they were holdover from when we took over the program, and I used those with him. I just combined the 2 small pouch sets so we had enough tiles, but since then our director ordered all 3 of our programs this huge kit, so we've got more than enough for as many students as we could. Yeah, it's awesome.
Oh, that is fantastic. Thank you, Catherine. We really appreciate that.
Thanks, ladies.
Thank you. Have a good one.
You too.
And let's see, Anna Adams, you have your hand up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unmute you. And Anna?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. I found a student that was having difficulties realizing that it took 2 x's to make an x squared, and that they were easily able to combine those x's together once they started using the algebra tiles, because they could physically see that when they had the x's together that there was actually 2 of them or more of them together, and that they could visually see it instead of trying to figure it out on paper.
That really is a good way to do it. Continue on, because want to hear more about just that visualization of your students.
Actually, I was working one-on-one with this student. I'm working several one-on-one students with GED alone. And after a while, she was able to take that concept, and she no longer needed the algebra tiles to figure out the math problems anymore. And occasionally, it took probably less than a day, and I only got to work with her probably about 2 hours a day. That she wasn't working with the algebra tiles as much anymore because that concrete example was set in there. So she could take it from hands-on to the next, didn't need them as much anymore.
Great.
That's really good to know because, you know, we always talk about, well, I can't take the algebra tiles into the test. And no, you can't. But what students are doing is they're taking that mental process that they went through. They've got that now. And they're able to do that type of thing and work with it. So that is great to hear. Thanks so much. We appreciate you sharing that. Melinda Parrott, Bonnie, has written a little quick note. She says, I introduced tiles initially for positive and negative numbers. After initial confusion, the students seemed to get it and thought they were helpful. So, you know, they're still a little bit of struggling with things. But she said, last week I was teaching a different lesson, and she says they wanted their tiles back. So, Melinda, that's really good because, yes, you know, and it does take sometimes a little time for our students to really get that ingrained as they're moving through. And I saw Jackie sent me a note and says, I found the hand. So I'm going to, at this point, I'm going to unmute Jackie. And if you'd hold on one second. And Jackie, can you tell us how things went with your algebra tiles?
Yes, two things. One was when they first started using the tiles, where we were, I forgot the exact word for it, but we were laying them out in perfect grids at the bottom, collecting. When we were collecting, they wanted to put things outside the line, you know, and they wanted to put, I don't know how to explain it, but I couldn't, for the longest time, I couldn't get them to understand. That was for, like, the problem is outside the line and the solution is inside, you know, or if you have the answer, then you work backwards to fill in outside the line. They weren't the same place. And then they finally got that. But my biggest takeaway was you cannot teach them the integers with the tiles if they've already mastered integers. Confused the heck out of them. And I finally said, that's okay. As long as you can work the problems, I'm not going to worry about you doing it with the tiles.
Yeah,
and that really is a good takeaway, yeah.
And I understand that because, I mean, think of how all of you struggled with trying to set aside what you already knew so you could work with this process. And so for students who really are, they understand the rules, they understand the why behind it, then, yeah, move them on into something that's a little bit more challenging, you know, and something that they're not going to have to maybe get confused over. So good point. Thank you, Jackie. We appreciate that. Okay, and let's see. I think we had Lindsay. I'm going to unmute your microphone, and I think you have a comment as well. So, Lindsay?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Now, I had mixed reactions with my students. The students who were already past adding and subtracting integers, and some of them that could multiply the polynomials, did not like the algebra tiles because they already had the process in their head. And they didn't want to go back and try manipulating. So they didn't like it, but the ones that I introduced adding and subtracting integers loved it because they could see the answer.
That's a really good point, and I think it's something that we need to keep focused on. Bonnie, one of the comments you made about the fact that there are different ways of going about working with algebra.
And there really is, and you really nailed it, as Susan had said previously. When students have mastery of certain, then going backwards, oftentimes they will push off a little bit because they said, I already know this, I know this well. And when they do, again, we don't want to go back to adding 1 plus 1. But the other thing is, as we had said in the training, many of our students are very visual and kinesthetic learners. They need to see it, they need to touch it, and it's a great way to get started with algebraic reasoning. Something that all of you may want to look at if you're teaching both ABE and GED prep, that you look at your ABE classroom, which is where algebra should begin and where the beginning steps of tiles should happen, so that by the time they get into that more complex thinking of algebraic reasoning, if and when you use tiles, they're for such things as compare and contrast, quadratic equations, those higher order thinking skills that they've not seen the concrete yet. So really, really good comments about why sometimes students don't want to do what we want them to do.
Thank you, Lindsay. Bonnie, we have a comment from Tammy Frazier and also from Jeff McDonald. Tammy says, I cannot talk, but would like to add that I find myself even using the tiles on the board, drawing them. And Bonnie, I think you and
they end up being addictive.
And that's really, I mean, if you think in terms of, okay, you're working, different equations or expressions, you're working through different things, what a great way, though, to be able to show students the abstract and concrete right there together. So that they can, they can see it, or I should say representational since you're drawing the boxes. But if you're using those tiles on the board, if you manage to have a smart board or you have a board where you can do the magnetic tiles, that's a great way to just reinforce what we're doing, that this is all the, quote, abstract way, and these are the more concrete. And Jeff's comment was the fact that it was great for kinesthetic learners. And wouldn't you agree, Bonnie, that's a really good thing for working with those algebra tiles?
It really is, plus the aspect that when students see that we also work kinesthetically, then they know that it is okay. Many of our students who are strong kinesthetic learners think that they're not always as smart as the visual learners, and no, that has nothing to do with it. They just learn differently. In fact, for those of you who are instructors who are very kinesthetic, I have no doubt that periodically you use your fingers to count, I do, and to draw. And so when you're not of that mindset, or that's not your strength in a learning style, just remember some of your students have, and you give them such a level of comfort when you integrate all of those different styles. So good comments.
And we have Sean Wren, who is on the phone with us. And so, Sean, you want to share? I see Sean's hand up.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Great, fantastic. Did we lose you again, Sean?
I don't know. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. If you want to go ahead and kind of talk to us about your experience.
Okay. I was working with a lady who was struggling with adding and subtracting integers. So we had worked on it for several days before I got it. It was actually the week before our seminar. And so the week afterwards, I had some tiles that I had bought from the lady there at the seminar. And I said, we're going to start over with this, because she was just totally confused when adding and subtracting. So we got out the tiles, and we worked for probably about 45 minutes. And she said, this is so much easier. But she said, but I can't take these tiles with me. I can do this with the tiles. So I said, you know, we'll keep practicing with the tiles, and then I'm going to show you a way to do it, you know, on paper without the tiles. And so we just started making plus and minus signs on the paper. And she got it so quickly. And she was just like, I can't believe we worked on this for a whole week and I didn't get it. And now I'm getting it in an hour. So she was really excited that, you know, it just clicked. That she was able to do it on paper just using plus and minus signs. You know, with the zero pairs, that just really worked with her.
Wonderful. And that's really what it's all about, what works for our students. And so you nailed that one. It really is what it's about.
And you know, sometimes we think about the process of how much time we've spent trying to, you know, explain something this way, and we explain it another way, and then we try another way, and maybe we have worked on things for quite a while, and then all of a sudden you bring one thing in, and it just makes all the difference. And for that student to be able to have success, what a great job, Sean, in working with that student, and you know, taking that whole process on again one more time. But to know that that student now has a way to work while taking the test, you know, and can handle this now even without the little tiles in her hands. So fantastic. Thank you, Sean, for sharing with us. And do we see anyone else who wants to share? If not, please feel free. You can always jot a question down at any time, and we'll be glad to pop over there, and you know, you can either have a statement that you make or you have a question that you ask. Either one will be just fine, and we can go on from there. But in the meantime, Bonnie, let's talk a little bit about the data. I know we talked a little bit about some of the research that the GED testing service has been doing, but how about we dive just a little bit deeper into that?
You know, that would be a great idea, because it really is wonderful research for us to know about in the field, because it supports what we're doing. And so as GEDTS continues to research, and it will be a longitudinal study, so stay in touch because more later. However, the initial research, which was based upon scores, based upon students who first started taking that new GED in January and went for 18 months, what GED testing service wanted to see was that the credential, and we're not talking about all of the upper, but just the credential, that it provides our graduates with the same opportunity that regular high school graduates have for going on. And then the credential, or the actual GED College Ready and the College Ready plus credit levels, if they have those levels, that it really does mean that graduates have those skills that they need to make sure that they're not having to take all the developmental ed courses. That College Ready and College Ready with credit really mean that those students are ready, that they're prepared for credit-bearing work at the post-secondary level. So that was the purpose, and what they found out was really exciting. Because what they've learned was that, first of all, we know that many of our students want to go on to post-secondary ed. About 2/3 indicate that on the test. That's always been. However, in the past, although a number of students would finally apply, very few would go that next step. What they found in this research was that 54% of respondents had actually applied to college, and 89% of that 54 had already been accepted. That is a huge increase from students on the old test who had gotten even effective scores. So looking at that many students being accepted into college, wonderful to know because they were meeting their goals. But there's more to it. And what they also found as they were doing the study was that the GED grads who earned that credential, that more than 35% had entered college. Remember, we're talking about the credential, not everything else. And approximately 70% had enrolled in two-year institutions. Not surprising to Susan and me, probably not surprising to you either. Many of our students are doing so many things with their life, and oftentimes the two-year institutions, the community colleges, the tech centers are in their neighborhood, and so much easier for them to enroll in. But the other thing is that students enrolled, they found that they did have a mean scale score of 160 on all four of the tests, which leads us to some of the next things, because what they found was that students who had that higher scaled score were more apt to enter college and, of course, more apt to succeed, and we'll see that in just a moment. We also know that our students, we've always known this, they've got high expectations. And as, again, we look at those students who have graduated in 2014-15, 46% of the students, they expect to earn that associate's degree, that 1 to 2 year credential degree. And a little over a third of them expect to earn that 4-year degree. But the other thing that's exciting is 20% expect to receive an advanced degree as well. They have goals, maybe long-term, but they have goals, and they realize that those goals they can attain. But again, the important thing to know is that 50% of those who expected to go to college, they've already been accepted. That's exciting because they're not waiting. They're not waiting for a year down the road or 2 years down the road. They're going directly from the credential into applying to post-secondary ed. But the most important or the most exciting thing, I think, Susan, is the fact that our students are doing so well once they hit college. If students got a 165 or higher on the math portion of the test, and of course we know that does include algebraic reasoning, they're getting a C or higher in regular college math courses, not developmental ed, but the regular college math courses. I don't know about you, Susan, but stat-wise, 96% of them getting a C or higher, that's marvelous, because we also know that the research tells us that if students have to take more than one developmental ed math course, then the chances of them ever graduating is in the single digits. So the fact that those students are entering college, they're taking regular math courses, they're bypassing developmental ed, and they're getting a C or higher is wonderful. But it's not just about math. It's also about reasoning through language arts. Those students who are getting a 161 or higher, and again, we know that if they're getting a 161, they're having to get some points off of that extended response. They're getting a C or higher in regular college English courses, and it's almost 100% of them. 99% statistically. Again, almost every student with 161 or higher is not taking a developmental ed course. Susan, what do you think of those? Does that not sound exciting?
There's a couple of things that sounds really exciting to me. One is that 160 number, that scale score of 160 that, you know, for those students that had already applied and been accepted in. You know, we are always talking about, you know, once we get up that college ready, and, you know, for some students seeing that 165, that's a little intimidating, you know, but here we are at 160. That was, you know, a mean score of 160. And so I think that's something that we need to keep thinking about, that, you know, we want students to pass the test and not just pass it with a, I have a 148, but, you know, if we push a little bit more, and as you said with the writing, if we push a little bit more on that extended response and reasoning through language arts, then there's some really great scores, very much reachable for these students. They can achieve those different scores. And to know that, you know, this is what we're seeing in terms of how students are doing once they're, you know, I mean, it's one thing to think about what they're projected to be able to know and be able to do, but it's another to have the data that shows that, wow, these students, you know, they're getting into college. This is a whole new experience for them. And, you know, the expectations in the college classroom are often so different than what we have in our programs. And, you know, I have to say that we don't always have the nurturers the way that we do in adult education. So to see our students doing so well, I think it's well worth our while as instructors to understand, you know, for each student, what's your next goal after the GED? And how can I help you achieve that? And we can keep those students maybe a little bit longer, and then they can exit on, and when they exit on, they can go into credit-bearing courses, which is fantastic news as we're going through. So Bonnie and I had talked with many of you about some of the data that had come out, but we just wanted to give you the hard numbers. All of that came courtesy of In Session, which is the GED Testing Service newsletter. So we hope that if you haven't signed up, that you will, so that you keep getting information, because as their research continues, they'll keep updating those individual pieces there, and we'll have more data with which to work. So in going through just a couple of things, we've had a couple people who I want to let you know that thank you so much for letting me know that you are sitting in with someone else, because we only see one name on the thing over here, so it's really good to know that we have other people who are actually joining in with us as we're going through. And you know, you can keep on asking questions as long as you want. We'll be fine. But there are a couple reminders for you. If you are one of those who is seeking PD credit, we need to make sure that all the interim activities and the reflection forms are posted, that all of those are on Edmodo. Bonnie and I have been feverishly reading everything, and actually, you know, we're so pleased with all that you have done and trying out the different types of activities and instructional strategies that you've done throughout the course of this year. It really gives us a chance to glimpse inside that classroom and to hear those things coming out about different students, and that really makes us feel good. But more importantly, that's a part of your PD credit. So make sure all of those things have been posted. The other thing is that we will be posting onto Edmodo the post-test for this institute, and we'll be doing that in the next couple of days, so we'll make sure to get information out to everyone that the post-test is up and ready, and hopefully we're going to see some real gains on our post-test as we're going through. But I think, Bonnie, you and I have a couple more questions for people, and this is kind of giving us a little look back, but also a little bit of a look forward. So let's get ready and do another couple polls here. So let me get the polls start opening, and the first question.
Okay. There we go. We'd like to know which of the workshops you found most useful to you in the classroom. Did you find that first one we did, quantitative reasoning, where we had the number operations, number sense, the tangrams? Did you find the second one, the problem solving, where we talked about the different graphic organizers and the heuristics to use? Or this last one, the algebraic reasoning, where we talked a little bit about algebra magic and we used algebra tiles. So if you will, please, which one of those did you find most useful in the classroom?
And we're at 88. Oh, Bonnie, we just popped to our magic 94%. So
Woo.
Having done that, then we're going to close that poll and we will share those results.
Boy, that is really quite even, because we always feel that sometimes the last is what people remember the best. But that's a very interesting division there.
Absolutely, and we do know that there are some of you there who, yes, you struggled with the nets and the tangrams, but you hung in there with us and took those things forward. So we're glad to see that the different areas have been helpful. And I think, Bonnie, some of that comes back to, who's working with what level students too. And so
True.
that can make a real difference as well. Well, having said that particular question, we've got another one for you. And this time, we really want to know where you want to increase your knowledge and comfort level. Which one of those areas would you really want to see more?
So there again, we're looking at quantitative, which are number operations, number sense, and geometric reasoning, or problem solving across the different content areas, or algebraic reasoning, looking at some higher level skills.
And we had a cute little note from Holly Campbell who said, I want to choose more than one on that last question that we had.
And that's all of us, Holly. It's kind of like it's a never-ending learning process.
Interesting, because as we go through on this particular one, and I'll share those results, you can see that problem solving just edged out algebraic reasoning. I think people want to work a little bit more with some problems, so that's something definitely to keep in mind as we're going through. All right, Bonnie, we have at least one more question. I think that's all we really have on this particular one, but this is our question for you. And as you work with students who are preparing for the GED test, we really want to know where you feel like you need the greatest assistance. And that could be either classroom resources or professional development. And I'm sorry, but you really do only get one answer on this particular one. So I'm going to launch that poll, and let's see where things fall. And we must have some people really thinking, Bonnie, because they're still down at the 50% mark.
Well, it does take a little bit of figuring out which is which and where I would like to go, and just what is going to work best for me in the classroom. And Catherine's comment, which we didn't put this up, is that she'd like to see a session that helps understand the connection between quantitative and algebraic reasoning. And there really is a strong connection between those two. They build not only upon each other, but with each other. So we need to think of that other one as, also a possibility.
Okay, well, we're at the magic 94%, so we will share those results. And it looks like the math and social studies and sciences just edged out close reading. And so that is something that we're planning to do as we move into the next year, and also to take a deeper dive looking into reading, the close reading skills, because, Bonnie, if students lack those close reading skills, then they really struggle when it comes time for them to be able to write the extended response. And
so true.
I think for our last question, we don't have that one, but we are going to look at having some more webinars as we move on into next year. But thank you all for participating in those polls and letting us have the information from there. What we're finding as we're going through is we don't have a lot of students who are earning any points from the extended response. So we'd like to change that because that can help make a difference for students in their overall scores. And especially, as you saw, for those students who want to go on to post-secondary, and not just for a four-year degree, but if you're really looking to move into some of the entry-level health careers, some other areas, it's the same thing as well, where they need those writing skills, and especially argumentative writing skills. So, having said that, Bonnie, can you give us a couple of tips for the future?
Tips for the future. As we've gone through this year, we've done an awful lot in tips and the kinds of resources you can use. And it really is, as Susan said earlier, all about problem-solving strategies more than computation, because again, so many of these things our students can figure out, and when they're in the real world, they need problem-solving strategies. The other thing we need to remember is to focus on higher order math in our GED prep classrooms. Some of the rules or processes should have been taught at an ABE level, so we need to make sure that we are teaching our students those thinking skills. And again, it really is that deeper understanding of concepts, the why something occurs rather than how do I do it. And as Susan said earlier, it is about close reading, whether it is a content area such as social studies or science, or it's the content area of math. And as often as you can, use manipulative so that students have different ways of seeing things. But the last one I think is the most important, Susan, and that's the aspect that we do have high expectations of all students, especially in math. We see so much of, I can't do it, I've never been able to do it. And so as instructors, we need to make sure that our expectations of them is high. Sometimes it's the way we teach it so that they have that aha moment and they realize that they are, quote, kind of smart in math. So if we remember those things as we go through and use good teaching, it will really help our students. So having said that, Susan, we are drawing to the close of our last webinar with these wonderful participants for the year. And, I don't know about you, but I had an absolutely marvelous time.
Yeah, I did too. I mean, there were so many things and so many takeaways that I have from the different sessions that we were in. For Bonnie and I, getting to do these sessions, having that opportunity is really fantastic for us, because there's so many things that we pick up from you, and we learn about things that are going on in your classrooms and kind of the changing world of the adult ed classroom and all the demands that are there. But most of all, what we pick up from everyone is really your heart, and how your heart is with your students, and that puts your energy and your time and your resources, and sometimes going way beyond the call of duty, sitting there at the middle of the night cutting out algebra tiles, to take something in that's going to make a difference for a student who will be able to have success, where in the past what they've had is a lot of failures and a lot of disappointments. So we have thoroughly enjoyed our time with you this past year. We're looking forward to being back in Kentucky next year. In fact, we're working on that process right now. So we want to wish that all of you have a wonderful summer, that you have as your year wraps up and you have more and more GED grads who are coming through your doors. Congratulations on all of those. And we also want to give you a chance, if there's any question or concern that any of you have and you want to jot it into the question box or raise your hand, either one is fine by us. We'll certainly answer any questions before we call it a day. So anything from anyone? And if not, Bonnie, I'll give you the last word.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for being with us today for this year. And you know, if there's anything we can do to assist, we're always here to help. You have both Susan's in my emails here. But have an absolutely wonderful day and rest of the week. And we hope to see you again very, very soon.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great summer.